Welcome to the Plant Trainers Podcast, where we're helping people improve their quality of life through nutrition and fitness. And now, your hosts, nutrition and wellness coaches, international speakers, Adam and Shoshana Chaim.
Hey, I'm Adam Chaim.
And I'm Shoshana Chaim, and we are
Propelled by Plants. Today we bring to you episode 212, Busting the Protein Myth with Dr. Garth Davis.
We work hard throughout the year to bring you high-quality information and amazing guests, and we are taking a little break throughout the summer. But as you know, since you're listening to this podcast right now, it does not mean that we're stopping. What we've done is we've made a collection of our favorite guests and some of the most popular shows, and we're bringing them back to you for 3 reasons.
So basically, some of you have been with us since the beginning, and now that we have over 200 episodes, we thought that not everybody has been subscribed since the beginning, and we don't want you to miss some of these really important shows like the one that we have for you today. So every time we re-listen to our podcasts or our webinars or our lectures, we take away something new or we realize something different.
And you might know somebody who can benefit from this show, and maybe you didn't think about it the first time. So as you're re-listening to the show and getting some new revelations, just kind of think about who could really benefit from this information in the show, and who do you want to pass it on to, and please share it with them.
So today we're bringing back one of our earlier episodes with Dr. Garth Davis. It's a really, really informative one. He's so into his research.
We talk about protein and how it relates to illness. We talk about carbohydrates, sugar, and so much more. You don't want to miss this one. The new cookbook is finally done. We created a cookbook that's perfect for any home, whether you're one person or a large family. Our beef or tofu with cookbooks is that you always want to make all the recipes in the book, and then you're left over with 1,000 ingredients and you don't know what to do with them. And also, recipes can be really, really difficult and take over an hour just for the main course. But this book is different. It's divided by ingredients, which allows you to A, batch cook and save time. Many recipes are made in under just 15 minutes. And B, plan your weekly meals based on ingredients, which saves you money. So head over to planttrainers.com or click on the link in the show notes and get your easy recipes for busy parents cookbook today. It's so simple, even your kids can make the meals. And did I mention that some of the recipes can be made in under 15 minutes?
And now for a moment of gratitude.
Since it's the summer and we want to always be true in our moment of gratitude, and we're not here to give one right now, we are just going to ask you to take a moment and find something that you're grateful for in your own life. So we're here with Dr. Garth Davis today, and we are very excited to have him on the show. We'd like to debunk some myths out there and really get into what protein is all about today. But before we do, Dr. Davis, can you please share a moment of gratitude with us, if you will?
Sure, I would love to. It's always good to have gratitude, and I guess I'm most grateful for my wonderful family that I love so much, that have stood by me when I've been so busy that I barely get to see them. So my gratitude is definitely for my family.
Cool. Dr. Davis, you have a brand new book out, Proteinaholic. How our obsession with meat is killing us and what we can do about it. And we were going to talk a lot about the book, but before we get to it, maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. Who's Dr. Davis?
Who's Dr. Davis? Sure. Well, I did my undergrad at University of Texas, went to Baylor Medical School, then did my training for surgery, general surgery at University of Michigan. And I came back to Houston and was asked by the chairman of Baylor there whether or not I would like to look into doing weight loss surgery, because no one was really doing it in the medical center. And I decided to kind of look at it, see what it was about. I harbored some prejudice against obesity, like many doctors do, where I didn't understand that it was a disease process. But I thought I would look into it. I started getting into it, and it was very technical surgery, so that's what was appealing to me, was this technical surgery. But over time, I found that I developed very close relationship with my patients, because this wasn't like when I do a gallbladder and never see them again. I started to see them often and deal with a lot of the issues that they deal with, the stress eating and the environments that they live in and the foods they eat. And so I really started specializing in weight loss surgery. It became my full specialty, and I kind of morphed out of general surgery into weight loss surgery, which I've been doing for 14 years now. I myself have the weight loss surgery path has really led me down a whole different path because in taking care of these patients, well, a few things happen. First of all, the patients motivated me. So I got to see, if you look at the average person, we live in such a rut. And, people they just do the same thing over and over. And you've heard the old term, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But what I was seeing in my patients is that here'd be like a 45-year-old or 50-year-old, and their whole life would change. I mean, completely change. And that was kind of stimulating to me. I was like, wow, I can't imagine, what if my life completely changed? What if I started doing something different? And so I started looking at myself differently. Now, about the same time, I was finding myself to be getting sicker and sicker. I had horrible irritable bowel syndrome. I was going to GI doctors for that. I went to get life insurance policy tested because I was having my first kid. I was 36 years old. And I get called by my life insurance agent saying, you don't qualify for the best rate. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, you've got pretty high cholesterol and your liver function tests are elevated, meaning fatty liver. And, I'm hypertensive. And so I'm sitting here, I'm like, I'm a doctor. I'm in a field where I'm supposed to tell people what to eat and be healthy. And quite honest, I had studied just about everything you could possibly imagine about the surgery, but I'd never studied what people eat, the most important thing. And so I really decided to turn my life around and to really study what makes people overweight and what we could do to actually put myself out of business, to try to get people not to be obese and not to need the surgery, and for those that get surgery to be successful.
How do you feel about the fact that you didn't really have the nutrition training, knowing what you know now? And are you holding the medical system accountable for that at all at this point?
Yeah. Look, I have such a different view on medicine now than I did before. It's weird. When you go through medical school, you become just enamored with the disease process, fascinated by cells. You go into residency. You don't even talk about patients in terms of a person. In other words, we would say like the colon cancer in room 1 or the breast cancer in room 2. It's like we were just fighting the disease. The patient was a bystander in all of this. And it's really like the opposite of a holistic view. You've got your cardiologist treating the heart and the gastroenterologist treating the stomach and, all these different fields, and no one's really communicating and no one's really thinking of the patient at all. And now I've got a totally different view. I've got this holistic view of, my view of the human body getting out of medical school was that it's just broken. We were like dealt lemons. It was going to break and it was our job to fix it. My view now is, fed correctly and naturally, the human body is almost indestructible. You could live a long, healthy life, probably a lot longer than our current lifespan.
So about 5-6 years ago, I went into my doctor and they told me that I had a tumor on my kidney. And the first thing the doctor said to me was, okay, we got to take out your kidney. And I didn't react very well to that. And I actually decided not to go that route after getting a few different opinions and figuring out what to do. What I wanted to do was just not have the surgery because I didn't believe that I had the kidney. I guess I was I had the kidney, but I didn't have the tumor. I guess I was in denial about it. But what I decided was to make a shift in my nutrition, and that actually helped out. And over time, every time I go back for my ultrasounds now, they show me that the tumor is actually slightly shrinking, which is very interesting to me that the food that I'm eating has really made a big difference in my body. So my question, I guess, is this is really powerful stuff, and food as medicine is unreal. So why are doctors not doing this, and why are they not treating the root cause rather than the symptoms?
They were never taught that. I mean, this is a matter of, it's not a big conspiracy. Like I hear on the thing, well, doctors are just trying to keep their patients sick. That's not it. When I talk with doctors, they just don't know this. It's like if they don't know it, they ignore it. And they don't know nutrition. There's several things that take place with a doctor. There's this kind of like not ever having been taught nutrition. They feel uncomfortable with nutrition, so they don't go to discuss it. Studying such complex pathophysiology that they never understand how food affects that pathophysiology. And then probably even more important, like I gave a talk to some endocrinologists about diet and endocrine diseases and diabetes. And they were like, look, you might be right. The science is good. You might be right. And eating a different diet may actually help with diabetes. But no one's going to do it. No one's going to try to switch their diet. And so, the way doctors are working now, I got 15 minutes with a patient. They don't know what to tell the patient about how to eat correctly. And so it gets dropped. There's no time to sit there and go through with a patient how to change their diet because it takes so much time to do that, and because they think it's wasted. It falls on deaf ears.
It's definitely something that's difficult for people to do, and they do need a lot of guidance and counseling with it. And there's lots of ways to get that help outside of the doctor's office. We help people with that, and there's lots of people who do help with making the transitions. But when people don't hear it from doctors and people don't have the evidence and they don't have the research, and everybody, their friends and their dogs and everybody's telling them, oh, but there's studies saying that meat is good for you and dairy is good for you, it just leaves everybody confused, and it's easier to go along in the way that they're going.
Right.
And take a pill or have a surgery and just get on with their lives. For some reason, that's easier than making the transition.
Well, the industry does that on purpose. So while there's not a big conspiracy theory with doctors trying to keep people sick, the industry is a different story. The dairy industry actually had a meeting where their expressed interest was to neutralize the evidence against dairy. And so that's basically what they do. If they could just create an argument, there could be, 10,000 articles. I mean, look at this whole climate change. I think they did a poll, like 98% of climate scientists believe that there is climate change and humans have a big factor to play in it. But it's that one dissenting person, paid for by Exxon or paid for by Tyson or whatever. That one dissenting person creates this kernel of doubt, which then grows into this kind of nutritional relativism, which is to say, look, I don't know if the steak's good for me, if it's bad for me. Some people say good, some people say bad, so forget it. I'm just going to eat it.
And it comes down to those industries just really wanting to stay rich, right? Of
course.
And then, that kind of feeds into the paleo movement a little bit. I mean, we're happy when people are eating clean and trying to make a difference in their life. But you talk about paleo diet a lot in the book, and you say that there's a link between animal protein and obesity. But so many people are losing weight on the paleo diet. So how do you discuss that?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, you got to show me the data. So you could lose weight from a number of different things. I mean, all my patients have done a million different diets. So when I talk about weight loss, I really don't care what people lose in the first 4 to 5 months. That makes no sense to even study because we know people lose weight in a number of different diets. The question is, what is the long-term success? I haven't seen a paper on long-term success with paleo diet and weight loss yet. Now, I've seen a lot of long-term success with vegan, as you know in the book. I detail that quite a bit. The other thing is you got to understand a lot of these people doing paleo diet or going to CrossFit. They've changed their life, right? They were a junk food eater, and now there are good things about paleo. You're cutting out all the processed food. You're not doing dairy. You're eating a lot more fruits and vegetables. Of course, that's going to make you lose weight. I would expect it to make people lose weight, especially when it's combined with a exercise program. But the question is, what's going to happen over the long term? And the studies are pretty clear that meats lead to weight gain over time when you look at big epidemiologic studies.
And I read through a lot of the book, and something that really resonated with me, you wrote, the real goal was improved health and freedom from disease, not simply a slim body still in failing health.
Right.
So that kind of fits in there because, you talk about the charcoaled meats a lot causing the cancer cells to grow or double or begin to create the cancer inside the body. So, I do worry sometimes when I see slim people who aren't living healthy lifestyles, what's actually going inside their body. They think they're healthy on the outside, but on the inside, they're a little broken.
Oh, of course. I mean, look, the average life expectancy of who you look at and think, oh my God, this is a healthy person, uh, is about 50s, mid 50s. Same with bodybuilders. This appearance does not, you can't judge a book by its cover. And you could look slim and you could look fit, and yet you could still be ill for sure.
And what's your biggest link between meat products and obesity?
What do you mean? Like what? Why does it cause obesity?
Yeah, why does
Yeah, that's a hard thing to tease out. I mean, there's no question whether you look at the Adventist Health Study or the Epic Panacea studies. If you look at it, the breakdown, vegans are the skinniest by far. The vegans are actually much thinner over a lifetime than vegetarians are, which is kind of interesting. Just that little bit of added animal protein seems to create a big difference between vegetarian and vegans. And then vegetarians tend to be a lot thinner than even seldom meat eaters, and seldom meat eaters tend to be better thinner than frequent meat eaters. What's the pathophysiology causing that? That's hard to say. It might be just the calorie density of the food. So meat's a fairly high calorie density food. There's a lot of fat in it, and fat definitely. Dr. McDougall says the fat you eat is the fat you wear, and that's definitely true. We could talk about the physiology of that, but fat is very easily absorbed in the fat cells of the human body. There's also some other things like when you eat animal protein, there's a lot more sulfuric amino acids that create an acidosis, and there has been studies showing that acidosis itself leads to weight gain. We know that there's endotoxins in meat, and when you eat meat, you get those endotoxins in your body. It creates inflammation, and inflammation's been linked to weight gain. And then, meat is a growth stimulator. It creates a secretion of a hormone called IGF-1, and IGF-1 is a growth factor, and that growth factor will cause increase in weight over time.
And you do distinguish a little bit between organic meats and factory farm meats. And although the organic meats are not great for you, they are better for you than the meats that are stimulated with hormones and antibiotics and things like that.
I mean, theoretically, that would be true, but someone would have to show me that paper because it just doesn't exist. The fact of the matter is a lot of the central bad things you get out of meat, you're going to get in, grass-fed meat too. So when you burn any animal protein, it doesn't matter how organic it is, it doesn't matter what it was eating, you're still going to generate those heterocyclic amines. It doesn't matter how pure that meat is, you're going to get a rise in IGF-1. For Adam and his cancer, the last thing you want to do is feed, cancer methionine. That's like one of its big factors for growth. Methionine is huge in animal protein, no matter how organic it is. I mean, you could take a chicken in your backyard, but that egg has tons of methionine in it, and that will feed cancer cells. And so, yes, look, there's going to be more omega-3 in grass-fed meat. There's going to be less chemicals in it, so that's obvious, but it's not good for you. I mean, to think because it's been out there feeding on grass, it's good for you would be a big mistake.
So you've dedicated your life to becoming a weight loss doctor, and you had a TV show. What was it, Big Medicine?
Yes.
And I guess the question is, we did a podcast on childhood obesity a few weeks ago. Other than eating well, doing some exercise, how are we going to help defeat this obesity epidemic that we're under right now?
Gosh, I don't see it happening. So much has to happen. I mean, so many things have to change. First of all, we have to come to terms with this is not, people that are morbidly obese are not fat, sick, and lazy. I mean, it's not their choice to do that. Every single patient that I treat has tried tremendously hard to lose weight. So that we got to get over this labeling and fat shaming that we do as if this is their choice. What you have to understand is there's a definite genetic component to obesity. There's been many studies on the genes. Some of the best studies were done in Holland where they had adopted children separated at birth that were identical twins. And they noted that, with identical twins, it doesn't matter what environment you grow in. If one twin's obese, the other twin could grow up in a really healthy organic family and still be obese. So there's definitely this genetics component to it, so we have to keep that in mind. But what those genes code for, it's kind of weird. If you look at an MRI of a person's brain, and you look at a normal weight person and compare it to an obese person and compare it to an alcoholic, the obese person's brain is going to look very similar to the alcoholic's brain. They have a lack of dopamine receptors in some of the pleasure centers of the brain, and so they're constantly searching for a way to uh, to kind of try to get those dopamine receptors filled, and so they're constantly searching out food. And then the bad thing is we got food everywhere. There's McDonald's on every corner that will scratch that itch that they have. So there would have to be look. The government has totally failed us with their USDA recommendations that are coming out. The industry isn't going to be on our side, and so what's the answer? The answer to me is to start with kids and start with a grassroots public campaign talking about these changes in food. I'm doing this right now at the hospital, and it's like pulling teeth to get them to serve healthy food at the hospital. It's a really difficult problem, and I don't see it going away soon.
So, almost 30 million children and adults in North America have diabetes, and 86 million Americans are pre-diabetic. I mean, that's huge. We've really got to get them young and start doing some prevention. We put out, we have a Facebook group, Moms Creating Healthy Families, and we're trying to get the message out about plant-based eating and making good choices and teaching our children to make good choices at a young age. And although we've lived our lives the way we have, and we've made mistakes and we may continue to make mistakes, trying to give better options to our kids and letting them grow up to be responsible adults and respect food as they move forward.
So how does the animal protein fit into diabetes?
Oh gosh, huge, gigantic. You just like it when you look at the vegans. I mean, the epidemic we're having right now with diabetes is unbelievable, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And I don't know, we don't seem to stop and ask ourselves why. It's crazy to me. But when you look at vegan populations, there's almost no diabetes. Very, 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 very low numbers.
We're talking type 2 diabetes.
Type 2, yeah, we're not talking about type 1, we're talking about type 2, which are two totally different disease processes for your listener. So when you look at it, what causes, everyone thinks about diabetes and sugar, and they think that diabetes is caused by sugar. The high sugars you get with diabetes are an end result. They're a symptom of the disease. They're not the cause of the disease. The problem with diabetes, type 2 diabetes, is that your cells can't take the sugar into the cell. That's the central problem, is that you can't get the sugar into the cell. So you eat the sugar, but it can't get into the cell. Now, the cell wants the sugar because it uses it for energy, but it can't get the sugar in there. That is the central problem. And the problem is because insulin receptors don't work. So in order to get sugar into the cell, insulin has to join with a receptor on the cell, so that it then opens up a glucose transport, so glucose will go into the cell. Now, what happens when you eat meat-based products? The fat mixed with the protein causes the fat to go into the muscle cells, and you get what's called intramyocellular fat. And this fat that goes into the cells interferes with the cell's ability to make insulin receptors. And when the cell can't make insulin receptors, the pancreas then has to secrete extra insulin. And you get into this cycle of really high insulin levels, which actually then cause more fat to be put into the muscle cell, and eventually you'll proceed to diabetes. And that's the general. There's other things that happen too when you eat meat. It's associated with heme iron, and heme iron is very toxic to the islet cells in the pancreas. And so there's multiple different mechanisms, but that's the main mechanism as to why it's causing type 2 diabetes.
So if a type 2 diabetic of, I don't know if time matters, of 5 years or of 30 years, then goes on a vegan diet, they're able to then reverse this problem, and the receptors will then be able to allow the insulin, the receptors will allow everything to start working again properly?
Yeah, time does matter. because when you're diabetic for a long time and that pancreas is churning out tons and tons of insulin, you actually will start to get beta cell failure. And type 2 diabetics over time will start to become type 1 diabetics. In other words, a type 2 diabetic produces lots of insulin but isn't sensitive to it. A type 1 diabetic doesn't produce any insulin. What happens in a type 2 diabetic who's had the disease for a long time is their pancreas stops producing insulin over time. And so they start developing like a type 1, and that won't necessarily get better and may get worse if you're eating lots of carbs. So yeah, time definitely matters. But they did a great study, a 72-week study, where they put diabetics either on a vegan diet, which had foods in it that, endocrinologists would never tell a diabetic to eat, like cantaloupe and pasta and potatoes and things like that. And they compared it. They took half the people and put them on that vegan diet, and half of them they put on the ADA, American Dietetics Association, American Diabetologist Association's typical diet, the ADA diet, which it is a counting carbs, low carb type menu. And the people on the vegan diet did 40% better at dropping their sugar levels, which was a very, very dramatic finding, and really goes to prove this point that you can, in fact, reverse the disease with the food.
So that's so interesting because you just mentioned carbs and we're talking about sugar, and we're all on this no carb, low carb. I can't eat carbs. So we're
High
saying
fat, high protein.
right. And so you're really, you talk about a high carb, low protein diet. So sugars being okay for diabetics.
Sugar's okay for diabetics as long as they're not eating meat. It's terrible if they're eating meat.
So you can't have the combination.
You can't have that combination because the insulin secretion will just further put the fat into the cell. If you're eating a very pure plant-based diet where you're getting lots of carbs, but not a lot of animal protein, and you're not getting a lot of fat, and you have a different amino acid uptake, you're going to get a very different situation where you'll start to mobilize that fat from your muscle cells, and things will get better.
Just so we're clear, when we're talking about carbs right now, we're talking about fruits and vegetables, and we're not talking about processed foods, right?
Yeah, that's correct. But in the end, it's all sugar. So that's like, people are always like, oh, fruit is sugar and therefore it's bad for you. You got to understand, sugar is not necessarily bad for you. The problem with sugar in its pure form is that it's been isolated from the plant, taken away from the fiber. Same thing as juicing. You take an orange and you juice it. You're taking the sugar and separating it from the fiber. That fiber is essential for getting a slow release of the sugar. If you don't have a slow release, if instead you get a rapid release of the sugar, then you get a rapid rise in insulin, which causes a rapid drop in your blood sugar, which causes you to be very hungry again much quicker, which causes you to overeat, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, processed junk sugars creates, yeah, it's junk, and it creates a bad situation as far as, calories without nutrition and more hunger. But actual sugar molecules aren't bad for you. Your body actually utilizes them very well. I mean, it's very hard. This is what people don't understand. It is extremely hard for the body to turn carbs to fat. People say, oh, you eat carbs, you get fat. It is just utterly not true. Your body, to do that is called de novo lipogenesis, and it's an energy intensive situation. Your body actually has to put energy in because your body wants to burn sugar. So what it'll do, if you take in sugar, either you're going to burn it or we could store it as glycogen. And your body won't turn it to fat until your glycogen stores are completely full and you're eating at least 500 calories over your net energy expenditure. And so that's a real overeating situation before it's turning carbs to fat.
So I have people that would say to me, why are you eating so much fruit? That's so much sugar. And my response is always, I'm not eating just sugar, I'm eating fruit because it's the whole fruit and it's got lots of fiber in it, so my body can handle it a lot differently than if I was just eating the fruit juice, for example.
That's exactly true. And you're getting all the nutrients, and there's never been a study ever that shows that fruit leads to or causes diabetes. The interesting thing, I don't know if you know the EPIC Panacea study, but this was this very, very enormous, the biggest study ever done on nutrition and health ever. I mean, the logistics of this study is mind-boggling. I mean, some of the best scientists in the world. It's called the Epic Panacea Study. It was set up by the European Union. 10 countries, 550,000 people, followed now close to 15 years. I think the database is somewhere between 12 and 15 years. And this database is amazing. And they've been asking the database different questions. And they've got very great statistical methods. Now, this is a huge epidemiological study. And with those, there's all kinds of interferences and stuff. They're not perfect studies when they're this big, but they're very interesting. And they asked the database, they try to look at diabetes and if sugar intake led to more diabetes over time. And in fact, the interesting thing was sugar intake led to a decrease in diabetes over time. I mean, how mind-blowing is that? The more sugar someone ate, the less diabetes they had over time.
Wow.
Which is just mind-boggling, but that's what the data found. And they definitely found a very strong correlation between meat intake and diabetes, which I go into a pretty good detail about in the book.
And then, of course, the sugar that you're talking about needs to be attached to the fiber, not removed from it.
That's always better, but I will tell you of an interesting story. And that is about a professor, Walter Kempner at Duke University. Have you heard of Kempner?
No.
No.
He came from Germany, and he started a lot of these ideas that probably the basic notion that fat and salt and animal protein were the source of all of our diseases. And that if we went to just sugar and we ate plain, just a very high starch and sugar diet, our disease would go away. And he started the rice diet. And you probably heard of the rice diet. Basically, what the rice diet was basically he would take people and he would put them on basically just rice, fruit, and sugar. And they were eating a lot of simple sugars, and they were eating a lot of fruit and tons of rice. And he documented the results very meticulously. His results were mind-blowing. Curing diabetes, curing hypertension was what he was really known for, and kidney disease. He did a wonderful job with people with kidney disease. But this diet, so absolutely opposite of what modern society would think was healthy, it had these. I mean, people were coming from all over to get treatment from him. Now, he was an eccentric guy, and he tended to whip his patients and got in trouble for that. And so the rice diet went away. He would whip them to keep them eating their carbs. But it's very interesting to me that these carb extremes tend to be very healthy.
That rice diet reminds me of when we were in Thailand about 10 years ago. We used to have rice with mango like almost every day, and that was like our diet. And everybody was thin in Thailand at that time. But if you go back there now with all the fast food joints that opened up, so many people are overweight in Asia. It's in Thailand specifically, in China where we were. It's unbelievable how it's taking over the world and changing our populations.
Yeah, Japan has got a huge diabetes epidemic going on, and their Ministry of Health actually released a statement. I talk about this in the book too. Released a statement saying that they believe this is because of the increased meat intake of the Japanese, and they recommend going back to a typical Japanese diet, which is very low in meat. And there was an interesting study in Hawaii called the Waimea study, where they took, because in Hawaii, boy, obesity and diabetes is just out of control. And they took these Hawaiians and they put them on what a Hawaiian would eat 100 years ago, which was a lot of fruit, tons and tons of fruit, and their diabetes went away. And they lost weight, and their hypertension got better, and their cholesterol level dropped. And so there's a lot of examples out there showing that a high carbohydrate diet is actually great for you. But you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have a high meat-based diet and then say, "Oh, Dr. Davis says rice is good for me, so I'm going to eat a bunch of rice too." It doesn't work like that. The beauty tends to be in the extremes.
So I find that it is very confusing. There's so many different camps out there: the high protein, the high fat, the low carb. Like for the average person who doesn't do their research, wouldn't it just be easy to just follow one of the camps and do whatever they're doing, regardless of which one they're in? And isn't it true, though, that every body is different and everyone reacts differently to foods?
A little bit. I think that kind of nutritional relativism is a little bit too far out there. Now, see, the thing is, if I take a meat eater and I put them on what I eat on a daily basis, they're going to feel like crap in the beginning. Not feel like crap. Probably have a lot of energy, but they will be extraordinarily gassy.
They'll have to go through an adjustment period.
They have to go through adjustment period because they've got the bacteria of a meat eater in their bowels. And bacteria, your microbiome, your microflora are absolutely crucial to the way you digest food. And so they're going to eat this food and they're going to get gassy and bloated and be like, oh man, Dr. Davis's diet makes me bloated. I'm obviously, not suited for that. But if I slowly put them on more fruits and vegetables and change their diet around, give them probiotics and talk about fructooligosaccharides and how to get them to feed your good bacteria. And we slowly make the change and they start developing the right bacteria. Pretty soon they're eating like I am and they feel like I do, which is like, unbelievably healthy. And so that's the kind of process I take people through when I see them on a one-on-one basis. So I think that nutritional relativism is a little bit overshot. Now, as far as just sticking with a camp and going with it, that could be a really dangerous thing. There aren't any long studies on people on high protein diets. There's every suggestion to believe that can be really dangerous for you. And there's been a lot. I go through it obviously a lot in the book. A lot of warnings by a lot of the top research institutes that these high protein diets could be very dangerous for you. So yeah, you're going to lose weight with them. There's no question because they limit the amount of calories you eat. Many of them put you into ketosis, which makes you not hungry, so you eat less. But they also increase your cortisol level, increase your inflammatory mediators, increase your exposure to carcinogens. And so I don't think these are good diets in the long term.
Now, I assume one of those studies you're talking about was the China study, and I know that
Funny
Dr.
enough, no.
Oh, wasn't. Okay, go.
I don't bring up the China study anywhere in my book. The China study is an old study. And there's much newer. Everyone loves the China study. It was a great book by Dr. Campbell, but that is old news. We have got some much more. What they did is just create a database. They didn't even do a real proper study. There's been many, many studies since then, and much better studies, I think.
Once you bring up Dr. Campbell, I noticed in the back of your book there are oils included in some of the recipes. So yeah. Can you just talk to that for a minute? Because a lot of this whole food plant-based is really what's out there now, but that doesn't seem to be what you're following.
Yeah,
exactly.
I don't like to go to extremes. Like, for instance, people use the term vegan. And yes, I'm vegan, but when I talk to my patients, I don't talk to them about veganism because to me, veganism has nothing to do with diet. It has everything to do with ethics. Right. Yeah. When it comes to the oil part, and I talk about it in the actual book, like in the chapter I'm talking about what to eat. I don't actually agree with Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. Campbell on oils. In fact, there's been a lot of recent studies, and they're looking at old data. The new recent studies are actually looking pretty good with the substitution of saturated fat for monounsaturated fat. Seems to be very good for the health. I don't think there's anything wrong with not using oil, and I use very, very minimal oil because for me the bad problem with oil is its calorie density. So if you're trying to lose weight, I would cut out oil. But if you're not trying to lose weight and you're an active, healthy person and you want a little oil in your food and it's a monounsaturated or polyunsaturated fat, I think you're okay.
So what's your go-to oil?
I don't really use much oil, but it would be olive oil.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the gluten issues. I know that it's a big deal to a lot of people, and I know I kind of know your point of view on things, but Shush doesn't. So I thought it might be a good idea to get into that. If you are celiac, obviously you need to be avoiding gluten. How do you feel about everybody else who says they're gluten sensitive, and should they be removing gluten from their lifestyles?
In some way, I want to say the jury's still out because there were some really good studies. One really, really good study. They took people and they took people that said they were gluten sensitive and they fed them one of three different diets. They divided them into three groups. One group had a very high gluten diet. They didn't know what they were getting. They were getting food. They didn't know if it was gluten, if it had gluten or not. One got a high gluten diet, one got a medium gluten diet, one got a low gluten diet. All three of them had the exact same symptomatology. In other words, the people getting no gluten whatsoever complained just as much as the people getting the high gluten. What's interesting to me with gluten sensitivity is there's no lab test, there's no inflammation. Like everyone's inflammation. But if you go into a gluten sensitive, not celiac, but a gluten sensitive person and biopsy the mucosa of their bowel, completely normal. No inflammatory cells in there. If you look at their inflammatory numbers, IL-10, things like that, completely normal.
Has there been a study where they've taken people on a plant-based diet, on a healthy plant-based diet, and measured their gluten sensitivities that way? Because I wonder how much all the other foods are playing into that, and if the sensitivity is actually coming from gluten or if it's coming from the animal proteins.
Well, it might not just be the animal proteins. It might be something called FODMAPs. And so FODMAPs are fructooligosaccharide. They're basically sugars on top of foods. And these certain sugar moieties, not sugar like table sugar, but glucose molecules that are on top of a cell. And it may be that the gut biome, that we've so messed up our gut biome that we can't eat those foods properly and we can't process them properly. And so then we get gassy and stuff like that. And so this may all be, the whole gluten sensitivity thing may all be a gut biome problem in the end. I think that remains to be seen. At the same time, I mean, like there's a study of nutrients this month that does kind of lend weight to gluten sensitivity, although the study is done in vitro in a lab test, not on human beings. So I don't think the jury's completely out on gluten sensitivity. Look, I think if we're lucky enough to live in a time that if you think gluten's making you sick, you got a million different other things you can eat in its place. And so, in general, most gluten-containing foods are processed foods, so I don't like them anyway. I certainly do wheat breads and things like that, but the vast majority of my food is oatmeal, berries, beans, potatoes, and salads that don't have any gluten in them in any way.
Very interesting. So I wanted to thank you so much. Today has been really refreshing. I think a lot of the information you have out there, you've taken a lot of newer studies. It's really eye-opening, and I really enjoyed what I did read of the book Proteinaholic, how your obsession with meat is killing us and what we can do about it. If people wanted to find you or order the book, what can they do?
I don't want them to find me. What is it? The book is available everywhere. It's in bookstores, and you can get it in Barnes and Noble or Amazon. And then, following me on Facebook would be the easiest thing because I'll announce when I'm doing book signings in different cities and things like that. And often I talk about diet and stuff on my Facebook page, which is Dr. Garth on Facebook.
We'll put all those links into our show notes. And I think it's about time that somebody came out with a book that's going to clarify this reductionist point of view of focusing on just protein, because that's everybody's biggest question. Where do you get your protein from? Why aren't you eating animal protein? Right. And I think this book really helps clarify a lot of those questions that people have. So thanks for putting it out. And thank you so much for coming on to our show today. We really appreciate having you here. We've definitely learned a lot from you.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me, guys.
Brilliant. Dr. Garth is just so incredible. What a great guy. What a great show. We love having him on, and that's why he keeps coming back.
We're really excited, so join us next Friday for episode 213, where we are back to the Plant Trainers Podcast regular schedule, and we have exciting new shows coming up for you. We're going to have amazing guests, and we are going to have great content to help you improve your quality of life through nutrition and fitness.
Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Plant Trainers Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or any other podcast listening platforms. We appreciate the feedback we receive from you. Every time we get a 5-star rating or review on iTunes from one of our fans, it ensures other people will find us too. Thanks to our patrons. To become a patron, visit www.patreon.com/planttrainers. Even supporting us with $1 really makes a difference. Connect and follow us on Instagram and Twitter @PlantTrainers. Like Plant Trainers on Facebook, join our newsletter, and check out our website at www.planttrainers.com for awesome plant-based recipes and a list of our services. Email your questions to info@planttrainers.com so we can answer them on our upcoming Facebook Lives. We hope we've inspired you today. Join us again next time and have a healthy day.